Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder it is time to have a look at another light cruiser that is coming to the game in update 1.91. Now, for the Soviets, we're getting the Chapayev, which joins the other light cruisers that the Soviets have at high tier, which are pretty powerful for what they are generally made out of. The Chapayev is going to be a machine which is sat at 5.7, rank 4, and basically what this means is it's going to go up against some of the other heavy hitters, such as the Hipper, the Brooklyn, and of course the Mogami. And the question is, will it be able to stand up with its armament, which, to be honest, is not too bad, plus everything else that is on board. So the Chapayev is an interesting story. If you know about the Project 68 series, which is what it's part of, they were designed and partially built before World War II in an effort to try and get the Soviet Navy going, but they also agreed to being part of the London Agreement. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's kind of a standardization of naval forces across the world. Many countries did sign up to it. The Soviets did it a little bit later on, but they still did it eventually. And what this meant was when the Project 68s were being designed, they were designed in a lot smaller of a capacity, but to have some form of the same firepower that their older ships had. So the idea was to try and make a smaller ship with the same firepower with a lot of power behind it. Now, they definitely struggled with the balance of this, which meant that the Project 68, which they were supposed to make over 20 of, they never really got off the ground in a huge way until after World War II. The Operation Barbarossa that happened, which was of course the German invasion of the Soviet Union, that kind of halted the Soviets in their tracks when it came to building these ships. A lot of them, or well, not a lot of them, some of them had been launched by this point, but were nowhere near finished in order to deal with the oncoming onslaught, which of course was the German army. And then priority shifted towards tank and plane manufacturing, meaning that when it came to the heavier ships that the Soviets had, they were definitely lacking in the area of the Black Sea. So pretty much what happened is the project was ceased until after World War II. And then after World War II, they made a bunch of different Project 68s, and the lead ship is, of course, the Chapayev that you see before you. So this is a World War II or a pre-World War II design, but was modernized into the 50s and used until the late 50s until it was retired from service. So this machine overall is kind of a World War II machine, but not really. And it is kind of also one of the last of the light cruisers that the Soviets ever used. If you know anything about the Project 68 class, they are definitely an interesting set of ships, but it also means kind of the end of the road for what we would see from the Soviet light cruiser designs, unless they decide to put in a bunch more Project 68s, which of course they could do, but at the same time it wouldn't be as interesting, meaning that going above and beyond into battle cruisers and even battleships or even heavy cruisers, I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen with the Soviets, because they lacked a lot of the larger vehicles that would be, around at the time. I personally thought when update 1.91 was announced and we knew that the Hipper was coming, I thought that the Soviets would either get a Project 68 or they would get another Hipper class, which of course they bought off the Germans. And I'm very glad that they got the Chapayev because it's going to be powerful. It's going to have a lot of stuff which makes it fun to use. And it also has some of the advantages over the big hitters that we see from other nations, whereas something like the Arethusa definitely doesn't. So the main thing on the Chapayev is that it obviously has 12 main guns. Now these main guns are 152 millimeters. They're in sets of triple stacks, 2 on the front and 2 on the back. So if you're going straight ahead into a ship, you're looking at 6 main guns on target, which is a good amount. It's generally a very nice amount that you have. On top of this complement of guns, what you have is 14 37mm guns. Now, these are going to be your AA defense, mainly, so, get used to them. But they're in some really weird ways. So you can see here, 14 37mm, and they're all kind of like sat in bunches like this. So they might be not just good against aircraft, they also might be good against stuff like battle boats and things like that if you ever find them. But to be honest, this is a 5.7 light cruiser, so I really doubt it's going to see them. If you want to know the full complement of stuff this thing can have, it has 4 152mm triple sets, 4 100mm dual sets, and then 14 37mm twin sets of 37s. So for me, there's a lot of guns on this machine. When it comes to its AA defense, it's generally going to be good enough. The speed of it is pretty much the same as everything else. All of these cruisers seem to sit around the 60 to 70 kilometer mark, some being a little bit lower and some being a little bit higher. So none of them seem to have the advantage there when it comes to speed. But obviously speed isn't everything. Acceleration, deceleration, mobility in the turn is things we're going to have to look at when they first come out to see who has the advantage in that regard. But the other thing as well is there's no torpedoes on this machine. And I understand for a lot of people, especially at the high levels, torpedoes aren't really that much of a big factor. I know a lot of people who kind of just dump them straight away. And the reason why they do this is because sometimes they act as ammo racks and decide to explode your vessel. But as an arcade player, who actually, the torpedoes in Arcade Reload, what I like to do is use torpedoes to try and corner off areas of the map, therefore I can focus on others. So if I have like 2 lanes, which are fighting against each other, if I know that one of those lanes is going to be covered in torpedoes, I can focus on the other lane to make sure that my guns get purchased as long as also as my torpedoes do. But with a ship that doesn't have torpedoes, the only thing I have is obviously main guns. So that is something that at least I personally have to think about. If we have a look at the other statistics of it, it has quite a lot of citadel armor, 120, 150, and also when it comes to the main turret armor, 175. So knocking out these guns, you're going to have to use AP basically, or you're going to have to really hit it hard with a HE. The 152mm, it's going to be hard to stop them firing. They're gonna keep firing. They're going to keep battering you, and therefore it is up to you to try and out-batter this Chapayev. And it has about 1,100 crew, I believe, or 1,100, 1,184, so it has about 1,200 members. And this is... If we compare it to other machines, so the Hipper has 1,400, I think the Brooklyn or the Atlanta has about 1,000, and then the Megami has 900, and then so overall it's got a decent crew complement on it as well. So at least there, when it comes to survivability, there's a lot, which is going for it. So the secondary armament on it, I think, is pretty good. It's not as good as some other machines, but it should be serviceable against aircraft and also any lighter vessels. When it comes to its main guns, with these 152mm, which are sat on the front and the back, and also the 100mm in the center, which are these weird SM51 cannons, which I personally don't really like compared to other 100s or 105mm that you see. So as you can see here, the armor 100mm, so should be good against HE, not great against AP, but there's nothing that can really stop 400mm penetration when it comes to the AP, and also of course the ammunition racks. The main problem that you can see here, so normally when you have a look at ships, they have armor around their ammunition racks, and obviously this is a good thing, it keeps them alive, but at the same time there's normally some extra armor. Now when it comes to either fuel tanks or just bits that are in the way for, ammo to survive. The Chapayev, as you can see, has a huge ammo rack on the front, and when it comes to its protection, it's not exactly the best. It definitely could use with some more stuff around those ammo areas. So I'm worried about this thing just popping when it gets hit. in those either front or back areas, and I think that could definitely be a weakness, because the fact that it has 2 smokestacks as well means that trying to knock it out of action when it comes to its engine power is going to be a lot harder to do than other machines. So instead, it might be worth just trying to pop the damn thing, just like you would with many other machines. But it's a very large, long ship when it comes to the amount of engines it has and the amount of surface it covers. So aiming for the front or back of it shouldn't be too hard to do, especially if one of those funnels is knocked out. So you can see the HE here with the 152, slightly worse than obviously the Megamis and the Hippas. 72mm, 6250 across the board, and has around about 6 kilos of explosive mass. So not a ton, it's still a decent amount, but it's not as much as others that you will find. Then it does have access to the SAPBC, which is always nice to have. But as you can see, look at the explosive mass, really low, incredibly low. One of the nice things about the 203mm in the game is the fact that even though they have AP shells, they also carry a ton of explosive mass. That is just not the case with the Chapayev, which is a shame for us. But it does get 2 separate AP shells. You've got the first APC-BC shell, and then you've got this one. And this one does carry a lot of explosive mass. So this carries up to 6 kilos of TNT equivalent, or 3.83 kilos of explosive mass. So for me, this is going to be the one to use, the SAPBC 200, 177, 73. It may struggle to pen certain things, but it won't, it should be okay overall. The main issue that I see with this machine is penetration on its guns and also fire rate. And because the fact is, if you have a look at stuff like the Brooklyn, the Atlanta, you have these machines that can get so many rounds off so quickly that if they're able to accurately hit your ammo storage, then you're going to die massively quickly once you're zoned in. Whereas the Chapayev, it's kind of in that middle ground where it has a good hit on it with the 12 152s, but it doesn't have as good of a hit as the 203s, and it doesn't have the same reload rate as something like a USS Atlanta. So it's kind of in that middling ground, so it's going to be interesting to see how it does in that middling ground. Because generally, the way I see it is you either get a one-punch man or you get, the guy who kind of lasts. The Chapayev is a little bit of both. So hopefully it does well. Hopefully it complements the Soviet ships at top tier, because this is the crowning champion of the Soviet light cruisers. It doesn't really get any much better than this when it comes to history, so let's see how it does. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, John Ryman, Joseph Anders, Martinez, Mopar 1969, Moxie, Super Cacti, Uyans Terry, and E Love Goats, and of course Seductive Trash Can for supporting the channel.